Hello and welcome back to your violence prevention training. My name is Ann Goodman. I am the coordinator of violence prevention here at EKU. The second module will be talking about consent. So our learning outcomes with this module are to be able to define consent and to learn about some of the myths and truths surrounding consent. So, starting off, what is consent? Consent is a clear, enthusiastic, and voluntary agreement between all parties involved in a specific activity or interaction. Our first myth is consent is only about saying no or yes. The reality of this situation is that consent is more nuanced than a simple yes or no. It involves clear, enthusiastic, and ongoing communication between all parties involved. Silence or a lack of a clear no does not imply consent, and consent can be revoked at any time. Our second myth is that nonverbal cues are sufficient for consent. The reality of this is that while nonverbal cues like body language can be important indicators, they are not always clear or universally understood. Verbal communication is necessary to ensure that there's a mutual understanding and clarity. Our next myth is that consent is only needed in sexual context. The reality of this is that consent applies to all kinds of interactions, not just sexual ones. It is relevant in friendships, physical contact, borrowing items, and more. Respecting personal boundaries and seeking consent should be a part of everyday interactions. Our next myth is that once given, consent is permanent. The reality is that consent is not a one-time agreement. It is ongoing and can be withdrawn at any point. It is very important to check in with the other person and respect their decisions, even if consent was given previously. Our next myth is that consent is not necessary if both people are in a romantic relationship. The reality is that being in a relationship does not equate to blanket consent. Mutual respect and communication are crucial in all relationships, and consent is still required for each and every interaction, even if you are in a romantic relationship with someone. Our next myth is that if someone is dressed a certain way, they're implying consent. The reality is that clothing choices do not imply consent. Consent must be explicitly given for each specific interaction or activity, regardless of prior relationships or appearances. Our next myth is that under the influenced or incapacitated individuals can give consent. The reality is that consent cannot be given if someone is under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or in a state where they cannot make informed decisions. Valid consent requires a sober and clear state of mind each and every time. The age of consent. Laws vary by jurisdiction, but generally they define a minimum age at which an individual can legally consent to sexual activity. Below this age, individuals are considered unable to provide legal consent. I have a video here for you. This is the T video. Some of you may have seen it. I know consent can be a heavy topic. This T video is humorous, but it is also very informative, and I hope that you enjoy it.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they go, "Oh my God, I would love a cup of tea, thank you." Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, "Hey, would you like a cup of tea?" And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you can make them a cup of tea, or not, but be aware that they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important bit, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you're entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say, no thank you, then don't make them tea. At all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind, and you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they are unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea, and they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea, and they said yes, but in the time it took you to boil the kettle or brew the tea and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down, make sure the unconscious person is safe, and this is the important part again, don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they'd finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they are safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, but you wanted tea last week, or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat, going, but you wanted tea last night. If you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you are able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, I'm going to make myself a cup of tea.
Okay, that video, while it is funny, hopefully helped you understand more about consent. One thing that I want to talk to you about consent is that less than 10% of sexual assaults are formally reported. This number is incredibly low, and it's a number that we want to get up. If something happens and you or someone you know are sexually assaulted, please formally report it so that something can be done to help you and to stop the person that has harmed you. Remember that consent must be given freely. It must be informed. It is reversible, and it has to be enthusiastic and specific. Again, if anyone you know has been harmed or is in a relationship that is not safe, you can scan this QR code for resources both on and off campus. You can also find these resources on our website. And again, you can visit our office at any time, located in Jones 409. You can also email or call if you have any questions or need any assistance.